Hello learners, welcome to this course on preparation of research proposal in social sciences. Today we are in lecture number 30 and topic is techniques of sampling. So let us discuss this key learning themes for today's discussion. Introduction to sampling technique, classification of sampling technique, probability sampling technique, non-probability sampling technique, choosing the right technique, pros and cons comparison, mistakes to avoid during sampling, and educational examples. Let us discuss this one by one. First is introduction to sampling technique. Sampling techniques are strategies used to select a portion sample from a population to represent the whole. Why it matters? Because it enables efficient data collection, cost saving, and valid generalizations. Key decision factors: nature of population, research objective, resource available. An example you can see here: a school district selecting 50 teachers out of 500 for a teaching style survey. As a researcher, it is of very prime importance to understand that what is sampling technique, because this is the thing with the help of which you are going to select your sample and make the effective outcomes out of it. And you can see here the key decisions which are related to sampling techniques are: nature of population, what kind of a population you have, what is the nature of your population. On the basis of that, you have to make a decision about sampling techniques, because there are various kind of sampling techniques we have already discussed in the previous lecture, and you have to select among all of them any one that on the basis of that I am going to select my sample. So it's highly dependent and related to nature of your population. Second is research objective. You have some certain research objective in your research proposal, and the way you have defined it, now it comes into the action that how you are going to select sample for that research objective, because you see a connection between this research objectives, your population, your sample, your data obtained, analysis, and then findings and generalizations. This all are very closely related, or you can see tied in the same kind of a thread. If you move one, second will ultimately move. Therefore, as a researcher, it is very important to make a very judicial decisions regarding sampling technique with respect to your research objective. Next is resource available. This is very practical aspect that a researcher have to understand, that whenever you are selecting or utilizing any kind of a sampling technique to select your sample, please be very specific and very practical in terms of resources available to you. Example you can see here: a school district selecting 50 teachers out of 500 for a teaching style survey. Techniques of sampling. Let us discuss this technique of sampling in a more detailed manner. Sampling techniques are the most researchers used to select a subset of individuals, a sample from a larger group called the population, to participate in a study, because it is often impractical or impossible to study an entire population. Sampling allows researchers to collect data efficiently and draw conclusions about the whole population based on selected sample. A framework that guides what data will you collect. Very important and very significant to be discussed here, that what data you will collect, it is being guided by the sampling technique. How will you collect it? Very important. I have again mentioning this thing, that it's a very practical thing, that you have to understand that how various kind of sampling techniques support a researcher in terms of these aspects. How you will collect it, very important. How you will analyze it, that also reflects from your sampling technique and sample, because the way you have collected and what kind of sample you have selected, over that you are going to do some certain kind of a data analysis. How will you ensure the results are accurate and meaningful? Most important aspect of sampling technique, that it helps you that whatever you have obtained, whatever data you have collected is accurate and meaningful. Otherwise, you may have very good research objective, you may have selected appropriate research design which fulfills the need of your research objective, but if you have not done the sampling process exactly as it should be done in your research, then it may misguide you, it may mislead you to a false data, which will certainly create problem with respect to accuracy and meaningfulness of your research finding. Selecting a sampling technique is a balancing act, very important. Selecting a sampling technique is a balancing act between generalizability, accuracy, cost and ethical consideration. It is important to choose the method that align with your research goals while accounting for practical constraint. Be prepared to justify your choice clearly in your research proposal, demonstrating how it supports your study objective and the reliability of your findings. So you can see here that whatever we are discussing, it is actually the spine of your research, because whatever you have tried, whatever you have articulated, whatever you have defined, whether your variable or other aspects or other components of in a research proposal, this is the phase, this is a point where you are going to utilize all of them. You are going to utilize all of them. So as a researcher, it is very important to understand that how techniques of sampling provides you flexibility, dynamism, as well as it gives you a chance to go more closer to your subject which you are trying to select and identify in your research, more closer to your subject in a true sense. And the more closer you are to the correct sample, the more closer you are to the correct sample, the more closer you are to the correct data, and at last you will be able to make proper generalization and make conclusions on the basis of your obtained data in some particular research. Classification of sampling technique, just have a recap here. Generally, we classify sampling technique in two groups. First is non-probability sampling, second is probability sampling. And you can see here, non-probability sampling is just non-random based, and probability sampling random based, where you give equal opportunity to all components, to all individual present in a sample of being selected. Probability sampling techniques, let us discuss in a more detailed way here. Every individual has a known non-zero chance of being selected. Very important. Every individual has a known non-zero chance of being selected. Techniques, let us discuss all these techniques. Simple random sampling, every member has an equal chance. Just I have discussed, every member has a equal chance. Example, randomly selecting 30 students from a class list using lottery method. Systematic sampling, selecting every kth member, choosing every fifth entry in a school attendance register. The stratified sampling, the population is divided into strata and a random sample is selected from each strata, selecting a student from different grades proportionately. You can see here a relationship between different techniques and their example, that what kind of a sampling technique you are selecting, and look into the sample coming out of it, the different kind of a sample that different sampling yields. You can understand here relationship between them. that when you are going for a stratified sampling, what kind of attempt you are making. You are selecting a student from different grade proportionally. Last is cluster sampling. Clusters are randomly selected instead of individuals. An example you can see here, randomly selecting entire schools from a region. So this is a small example that I have given, and one recommendation is there that as a researcher you have to utilize all these things on the basis of your requirement. What is your research problem, what is your research objective, what kind of a intent you have towards some particular research. You have to make selection very wisely with respect to selecting any kind of a sampling technique, whether probability, non-probability, or other aspects that you are looking into that. Non-probability sampling technique. Not all members have a known chance of being selected. Not all members have a known chance of being selected. Techniques, let us discuss the techniques. Convenience sampling based on availability. Example, surveying students available in the library. Purposive sampling, chosen based on purpose. Selecting top performing teachers for a study on innovation. Quota sampling, predetermined number from groups, selecting 10 students each from urban and rural schools. Snowball sampling, participants refer others, and example you can see here, used in alumni studies when contacts are limited. So you can again see a relationship here between the examples that is being quoted here and techniques that we are discussing, especially when you see snowball sampling. Here participants refer others. When it is used, you can see here, used in alumni studies when contacts are limited, means the researcher does not know that who will be the next sample, who will be the next sample, who will be the next participant in a study, and that is being guided and dragged by the sample that researcher obtained first hand. So this is how this sampling techniques are being used in different kind of researches. And as a researcher, again I will say here it makes a very important sense to all of us that whenever you are utilizing any kind of a sampling technique, be very wise in terms of looking towards demand of your research objective. What your research objective demands, what your research question is targeting, what kind of variable you have selected. Look into the feasibility and connection of all these things together so that you can make a correct decision regarding selecting and using any specific sampling technique. Choosing the right technique, this is how you know that there are several kind of a sampling technique, but which one will be right for your study? There comes a big question that which one is right for your study. So there are some decision factors you can see here on the screen. Nature of research, very important and very significant, that what is the nature of research, exploratory or any other kind of a research that you are taking, population size and diversity, ethical considerations, budget and time constraint. An example you can see here, a study on stress among teachers will use a purposive sampling technique. A survey of teaching styles preferred by teachers will use the stratified random sampling technique. So this is how you see what is the nature of your research. Nature of the research means whether you are going to do exploratory research, you are going to do experimental research, whether you are going to do some certain kind of case study, whatever you are doing, you have to understand that what your research demands and require. Because the moment you understand the demand of your research, you are moving slightly towards the idea of to whom you are going to do this, over whom you are going to do this. And the moment you think this thing, it will definitely give you a tentative idea of what kind of a sample you will have, and ultimately what kind of sampling technique you will utilize to select it. So nature of research plays very vital role in making a right decision regarding technique. Next is population size and diversity. Most important thing. What is your population size and how diverse it is? So you have to understand this also and make a wise decision regarding selecting and understanding your population size along with its diversity. Ethical consideration. As I have just discussed, whenever you are going to select a population, whenever you are going to define your population or make your sample and sampling techniques, you have to be very careful about your ethical consideration, that you are not violating any kind of ethical aspects that may hamper the sample, the population or an individual. So look into these aspects. Budget and time constraint, most important and prominent in terms of selecting your sample size, sample frame, whatever you are selecting, you have to be very cautious and very focused in terms of your budget and time constraint, because if you do not understand your budget and time constraint properly, there's a chance that you are going to make a wrong attempt in terms of selecting your sample. Example we have already seen, like when you are going to select or conduct a study over stress among teachers. Now you can see here stress among teachers, you will use a purposive sampling technique. Why to use purposive sampling technique? Answer is, you are selecting those teachers, those who are having stress, those who are having some kind of a stress that you may define in your research operationally. So when you are going for any specific kind of a issue, you are going for purposive sampling technique, because the sample should serve your purpose specifically and you have to identify that samples and then collect the data from them. Second is a survey of teaching style preferred by teacher. We'll use the stratified random sampling technique. Whatever you are doing in a form of a survey, for example, when you are going to do a survey over teaching style preferred by teachers while teaching, definitely there will be different kind of a strata that you can make, that science teacher, English teacher, maths teacher, and among that strata you are going to select some sample out of it, and that will guide you exact data that what you are trying to inquire. Some pros and cons you can see here. Whenever you are going to do or make a selection between probability and non-probability sampling technique, this is very important to understand what to do, what not to do, what kind of issue that you can face while differentiating and making a decision that which is to be selected and which is not to be selected. So first is probability. You can see here high generalizability and reduced bias. Most important thing in a research, when a researcher makes an attempt, that researcher wants to do such kind of a research where generalizability is the key aspect. When you want to make generalization over whatever data you have obtained, then you have to look into these factors, that your sampling technique should be probability sampling technique, because it reduces the bias also, and as you know, it gives the equal chances to all to be selected in a sample. Next is costly, time consuming. This is the issue with probability sampling. It is costly and time consuming because it, as first of all, it takes more times, because you are giving equal opportunity to all the components of a sample population to be selected as a sample. So definitely it takes more time as compared to non-probability, and since it takes more time, it is costly also. Next is non-probability. Quick, flexible, very important, but sometime you have to understand this, that demand of the research is like that, that you have to make a selection of sample in a quick way. You have to make it flexible. It's not about that you are only selecting non-probability for quick and flexible method. The demand of the research is that the research demands such kind of a sample, that you have to select sample in a quick and flexible manner. Limited generalizability and potential bias. This is a twofold kind of aspect of non-probability sampling. Like when you are doing certain kind of a research where you have to opt for a non-probability sampling technique, then it is sure that generalizability of that kind of research will be limited as compared to probability sampling technique. But your research demands that I have to do, because you have articulated things like that, that you have to do certain kind of a research which cannot be completed without utilizing non-probability sampling technique. And since it has a limited generalizability, it has some potential biases also related to researcher. It has a threat that researcher can make a mistake while doing non-probability sampling, and it leads to the unconclusive aspect of the research. So it is very important that the how you utilize probability and non-probability sampling effectively. So look into these aspects when you are doing or selecting your sample with the help of sampling technique. Be focused towards your research demand. Be focused with research demand, what your research is trying to ask, what your teacher research is trying to inquire. Look into these aspects every time, otherwise the probability and non-probability sampling will not serve the purpose. Tip is there: use probability method when generalizability is the goal. Here you can understand it with a very thin line difference, that when you do not want to generalize something to the larger population. For example, when you are studying the eating and survival habits of cancer patients, you are not going to generalize it to normal persons, those who are not suffering from cancer. Then you have to go for such kind of a sampling technique, which will definitely be non-probability sampling. So you can see here that you are using probability and non-probability sampling techniques with respect to demand of your research, with respect to the demand of your research. Therefore, you can clearly understood here that a basic difference between probability and non-probability sampling technique is related to generalizability. And when, as a researcher, you are looking and trying to do that kind of a research where your generalizability is the key aspect, you want to generalize finding of your research, then it is recommended that you have to use probability sampling techniques. Some mistakes to avoid during sampling, which generally happens. So look into this aspect. First is sampling only from easy accessible groups. You can see when you are going to do sampling only from those kind of a group which are easily available to you, it makes no sense in a research. It makes no sense in a research because it will be highly biased. Highly biased because you are not exploring the sample and population truly, and you are trying to select or define the population and ultimately your sample with respect to only availability. Since it is easily available, you are selecting it as a sample. This will be completely wrong. Look into the demand of your research objective. Look into the demand of your research. Look into the hypothesis. Look into the other components and then move towards the sampling. That yes, this particular sample that I have selected is going to serve the purpose of my study. Second is ignoring subgroups. This is a very common and I would say a very serious kind of a mistake that happens while selecting the sample. There are several kind of layers that are hidden inside one layers, and as a researcher it's your prime responsibility and duty that you explore that layers effectively so that you can make more meaningful interpretations out of your research. You can conclude more meaningfully, you can contribute more significantly to the existing knowledge, and ultimately improve the quality of your research. That is subgroups. There are various kind of a subgroups within the sample and population that a researcher has to understand, and not only has to understand, have a very key eye over that aspects like gender, region or any other kind of a subgroup, especially when you are doing a qualitative research where you want to go more deeper into the subject perspective, thoughts, opinions, beliefs, cultural practices. You have to understand, counter, and utilize these subgroups. So, do not ignore these subgroups when you are doing sampling. Over relying on sample size instead of techniques. This is also very important, that most of the time you feel that if I take more sample, if I take larger sample, my research will be good. It is not like that. It is not like that, because research is not about the numbers. Research is about the way you articulate the things, the way you understand the thing, and the way you define and execute it. So, it is very important that do not rely over taking more sample size, rely over techniques that which is demanded in some certain kind of a research design. What is the requirement of your objective? Proceed accordingly. What is being required, what you are actually trying to inquire in some particular research, you have to move accordingly. So, do not over rely on sample size. Best practice: justify your sampling method in your research proposal with context and rationale. This is very important. Keep in mind and make a note of it that whenever you will be in a stage to write your sampling process in a research proposal, the moment you start writing, look into these two aspects, that your sampling method in your research proposal is contextual, is related to your topic, is related to your objective, related to the demand of your study. What kind of study you are doing, it related to that particular demand, as well as it should have a proper rationale that why you are selecting some certain kind of a sample. You should have rationale, you should have justification that as a researcher, this is my aim, this is my objective, and this is what I intend to do, and for this purpose I have to move accordingly to reach out some certain population which I am writing here with the help of some certain sampling technique. And this is how you make your research proposal sound as well as appealable and communicate your thoughts properly to the person concerned. Concluding discussion from this lecture, major takeaways you can see here. Sampling techniques affect the validity and reliability of your study. So, always report and justify your sampling approach rationally. Second, selection should be based on purpose, practicality, and population characteristics. And third is combined method, that is stratified or random when necessary for your better representation. So, you can understand here that whenever you are going to select any kind of a research topic, you are having definitely some certain background and rationale that continues to the sampling technique also, that continues to the process of doing sampling. You have to look into the purpose, practicality, and related aspects of the population, characteristics of the population, that whatever you are selecting as a researcher, that this is my population, this is my sample, whether it serves the purpose or not. And if it serves the purpose, incline with the practicality, with the feasibility, whether you will be able to reach out that sample with provided facilities and finance. You have to make sure that whether you will be reach out to that thing or not. And it is very important that sometime research have diverse kind of need and requirements. They have different kinds of a requirement. So, it is suggested also that sometime you can mix different kind of a techniques also for better representation, because the way you do your sampling, that kind of a sample you will yield, and ultimately that sample you will utilize for data collection, and data obtained you will do analysis and make some meaningful interpretations and generalizations. Especially when you are trying to do generalizations, it is very important that you have defined your sampling technique rationally. Why this particular sampling technique you are going to choose? Because it strengthens the quality of your research proposal. Someone who is examining your research proposal will be impressed by knowing the clarity and understanding that you have with respect to various components together. Because as I have said, all components are interlinked and highly dependent on each other. So it is suggested that whenever you make your sampling technique and make a decision toward this aspect, take care of this all important suggestions. So this is all from this lecture. Thank you so much.